Oh, how should I introduce you?
It maybe
Consultant, freedom
uh,
fighter.
um yeah. However you want, it's like you can say my title is program analyst at the Campaign for College Opportunity.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So we're live. So we're live. Joined this hour by Danny Murillo. This is really, really exciting. This part for the Dawes Center for the Arts Signature Series. He's a speaker. He's a writer. He's a scholar. He's a program director, and we're really, really, really excited to have him to talk about some of the some of the struggles that people are facing. Far too many of us are facing in this country. And I'm really, really excited. So Danny, I'm gonna let you just kind of start us from the beginning. Like, tell us tell us how'd you get involved in the work you're doing right now, in the work you've been doing for the
For
past.
sure, for sure. Yeah, this work I've been doing probably really started once I got to solitary confinement, I guess, and it's really I was in solitary confinement from 2003 till January of 2010. Spent most of my time in Pelican Bay State Prison, about 5 years. And once I got to Pelican Bay State Prison, that's pretty much where there's just a paradigm shift occurred, right? It can't be one specific thing that created this paradigm shift. It was a combination of influences, whether it was the things I was reading, the things I was watching, the people that were around me. But the work that I've been doing is really just rooted around higher education, right? And for me, I realized that higher education was a tool for me to allow me to transform my life and gave me an option or a path to be able to build a new life after being released, right? So after being released in 2010, I continued my education, went to community college for 2 years. I had a great experience at Cerritos College, right? I had a great community of people there that were supporting me. And when I went to UC Berkeley in 2012, um, that's really where I really started doing the work, not just for myself, but for other people, right? My first day at UC Berkeley, first day of school, I met another gentleman who also spent about 18 years incarcerated and about 8 of those years in solitary confinement, right? Like as soon as I seen him, like, yo, there's something about this dude, man. I got to talk to him. And within maybe like 5 to 10 minutes of talking to him, we both, shared our very intimate secret of being in solitary confinement, right? And from there, I just started meeting people at Berkeley. I was very open about my past experience, um, but only with certain people that I felt I could connect with, right? And some of those people were Patricia Pat Hilden, ethnic studies professor at Berkeley, Victoria Robinson, also a lecturer in ethnic studies, um, Francisco Cacique, who at that time was a graduate student, and now Dr. Cacique, a PhD in ethnic studies. These were folks that I was just meeting, just not. I was seeking folks out, but I didn't know who they were, and I found a community, right? And I shared my story with folks. People were like, "Yo, let's start a conversation about starting something here for formerly incarcerated people. We just don't know who's formerly incarcerated because so far it's just you and my friend Steven who were identifying as formerly incarcerated. But the more we shared our story, the more we shared our story, like people just started coming out of the woodwork. Like we'll be in class sharing I'll be in a class, I'll share my story, and as soon as the class is over, everybody's walking out, and there's one person, whether it's a guy, a man or a woman, that stays behind. And like I already know when I see that happen, like okay, this person wants to talk to me like on a personal level,
Yeah.
and people would come back, stay behind and be like, "Yo, man, thank you for sharing, man. I'm also formerly incarcerated. I just didn't know how to talk about that. But now that you're here, like, yo. And little by little, people just started coming out, right? And I think what really gave us a platform was around the same time that we started organizing to build what ended up becoming underground scholars. Also, folks on the inside in Pelican Bay State Prison were organizing the third and final hunger strike in 2013, right? So around 2012, 2013, when we were organizing to build up underground scholars and just having those initial conversations, um, I ended up connecting with someone who had ended up having a big impact in my life, and that was my friend Azadeh Zorabi, who is now the director of Underground Scholars, right? How It's interesting how just things, come full circle, right? But she at that time she was in 2012 she was doing a Soros Justice Fellowship around supporting the men inside solitary confinement. So she was on the outside supporting organizing work out here to support the hunger strike that was going to happen in, I think it was July 8th of 2013. So I met her in early January of 2013, and she asked me, "You want to be part of this work?" And like, yeah, fuck yeah, like I want to do this, and little did I know that that was going to be like it was literally like an international platform that I was given, right? Like we were having conversations with, Al Jazeera, BBC News, being interviewed by all these different, whether me or my friend Steven, right? We pretty much became both of us became the spokesperson, along with Dolores Canales, Marie Levin, who Dolores Canales had a son in solitary, Marie Levin had a brother in solitary, and I think two other community organizers and a lawyer were like the spokesperson, right? And yeah, that gave us a big platform, bro. Like, people would talk about, we'll talk about our experience in solitary confinement, and then the last question I was like, well, what are you doing now? Like, I'm a student at UC Berkeley, and people would be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, you went from being the worst of the worst to now the so-called best of being attending one of the best universities in the country.
Yeah.
And so people, were taken aback by that, and I think that right there gave us a larger platform to be able to do the work that we were doing on campus.
Yeah. So can you tell the audience a little bit, because people have just different ideas about what prison really looks like when you say solitary confinement. Like, what is that? Like, what? Like, some people think it's just like a dungeon. Other people are like, well, what? Tell us what is like solitary confinement? What is that like? What like what's like the, not like how you feel, but like
Right, right.
what are like what's the dynamics, the
Right.
mechanics of it?
So it's definitely not what it used to be, right? I'm sure it's definitely changed from people that did time in the 1960s in St. Quentin's Adjustment Center, where they had, you know, um, like George Jackson and the Solidarity Brothers back in the 1960s, right? It's very different, I would assume, but the solitary confinement in Pelican Bay, you know, they're you have a pretty spacious room. Those are like the biggest cells that I've been in, but there's nothing in there other than just a toilet and a slab of concrete that you sleep on and a slab of concrete that you use as a desk, right? Um, it's solitary confinement in the sense that you're in there by yourself all day, right? There's no other human contact other than being able to touch somebody's pinky when they come to your door, and that's the way we used to shake hands, right? Because we have these gates where like very small little holes all over the door, right? It's a metal gate, and that's the way we would shake hands. We'd put our pinky through the door, and good morning, homie, and we'd come out for an hour a day, an hour and a half a day, by yourself, right? Or if you have a cellmate, you come out with your cellmate if you want, right? And it was it is a place, right, where if you don't find something to do, it'll destroy you mentally, right? And so for me, and I realized this early when I first even started doing my time in general population. Was like when I first started doing my time, I used to just sit on my bunk all day and just watch TV. And then I had older homies be like, "Yo, man, you ain't doing your time right, man. That's not the way you're supposed to do your time. You need to start doing, we start reading some books, start doing some exercise, start doing some, even some arts and crafts, and so all of those things that I learned in general population, I took with me to solitary confinement, right? And I realized like, yo, I needed to kind of have a program, right? Because if I don't have a program, then it messes with your head, right? And so for me, my program was like, I'd wake up at 5:30 in the morning, clean my cell. By 6:30, I'm working out for like an hour, wait for my breakfast to come. After eating my breakfast, I'll read for a little bit. 9 o'clock every day, 9 a.m. Monday through Friday. Democracy Now, right? Listen to Democracy Now for an hour. You know, um, Depending on the hour of the day, but throughout from like after Democracy Now, I'd probably read up to like um, 12 o'clock. Have lunch and then work out again or play chess. Go out to the yard, work out or just walk around. I used to do a lot of walking, and you could just walk in circles though. That's all you can do. It's not big enough to run, right? So you literally just walk in circles on, or just sometimes I'll just take my blanket out there and just depending if it was 12 o'clock
Mhm.
at noon, I'll take my blanket out or my towel and I just lay out on the floor and just sunbathe for an hour because that was like the only time you would catch the sun, right? Because
Yeah.
you're surrounded. when you go out, like where you're on the patio where you're at, it's surrounded by a wall that's 18 feet high, right?
Yeah.
So you're surrounded by a whole wall, and only the top it's uncovered, but it still has a gate with barbed wire fencing, right?
Right.
So you get to see the sun, but only if you come out, at high noon, right? And so there's 4 cells. It's 8 cells per pod, right? It's 8 cells per pod. 4 on the bottom, 4 on the top, um, and the cells are facing a wall. So that's all you get to face the whole time that you're in prison. It's just this white bright wall, and and then on the other side, it's the same thing, but just inverse, right? So there's cells on the other side with 4 cells on the bottom, 4 cells on the top, staring at the same wall. They're just staring at the other side of the wall that you're staring at, right? And you get to see people, bro. You get to see people. You get to talk to people, but it's not the same as being with someone face to face. You know what I mean? So you either have to talk through the toilet, you have to talk to the vents, or you have to yell out your door. And doing that all day, though, there's times where like, um, it's like a unwritten rule, right? Like, yo, from this time to this time, like everybody just stay the fuck off the tier, right? Like let give everybody their peace and quiet, right?
Yeah.
But usually, like from like 8 in the morning to about 8 o'clock at night, it's what we call the tier, or the pod to talk or yell out the door. It's open to anybody that wants to talk, right? But we also be mindful of like not taking up 2 hours of just yelling out to your homeboy, right? Like because people do get frustrated, right? That, having to constantly hear people just yelling all the time, right? So depending where you're at, because you could be in a pod where someone who doesn't have it together, right, is going through some type of mental breakdown and can be pounding the sink all day with this cup. Like imagine like a plastic cup pounding like a sheet of metal all day, or up against the wall, or somebody kicking their door all day. And luckily for me, I was never in a situation like that. But it is taxing on people, yo. Like, you're not the one that's having the mental breakdown, but you're next to someone that's having a mental breakdown, and it impacts you. And so luckily for me, I was never in that situation, yo, and I was always surrounded, um, I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by people who seen something in me that I failed to see in myself, and that was my own humanity.
Yeah. So again, just the dynamics of this. Now I'm kind of curious, right? I'm gonna ask you a pretty square question. How did you play chess? I mean, like, do you have your own personal effects, and you're like yelling out like Rook V to like Queen, like, and they like move there. I mean, how did you?
I used to make chess pieces. That was one of the things that I used to find was very therapeutic for me, bro. I used to make chess pieces and chess boards for people. So if anytime someone new came in, I don't care if he was black, norteño, white, a homie or a sureño, like, you play chess, bro? Like, yeah, I'll make you a chess board. I'll make some chess pieces, And so that for me was something that I found to be very therapeutic, And but you make the pieces, you draw the board, and 1 through 64, right? Because it's 8 squares across, eight
Yeah.
squares, so 64 squares, and you just number them, and you just yell out the number like 1329, my pawn, 722, my knight, and just kind of you like yell out your pieces. But there's people, bro. There's people in solitary confinement that can shoot a game of chess while they're in the shower, and I'm in my room playing with my board. Like, people are just off the top of their head. They're showering 1329, 13, just shooting all these numbers. And like, oh shit, man, you checkmated me, bro.
Yeah, that's wild. Damn. Well, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're doing a thing over and over and over again. So yeah,
Yeah.
damn. That's like that because I play chess, right? But you know, I'm one of those people. I'm in those that kind of tragic position where I'm better than all my homies. Like, I'm way better than all my homies, but I'm not good enough to play competitively, right? So like, I can't have fun with my homies. But then when I try to enter a competition, I get smoked by like a 14-year-old, and I'm like, like.
That's funny though. That's funny because I play all day on the computer, right? And I haven't
Yeah.
played with people in a long time. And
Yeah.
one day when I was out there in Berkeley, and when I was living in the Bay Area, um, my nephew was working at a restaurant where they were having a chess tournament, and he texted me like, "Hey, they're having a chess tournament here. Come through." And
Yeah.
I go there, yo, and a girl in 7th grade, yo, whooped my ass, yo.
And
Oh,
and they always got the parents standing over like, good, good.
yeah,
Like, it was
yeah.
like, it's like, yes, yes. It's like, oh man. Yeah, I'm glad you two are having a bonding moment here at my expense.
Yeah, man, that was kind of humiliating. But I even took a picture with her and I gave her props, yo.
Yeah, well, of course, of course. I mean, there are levels. There are levels, right? All right. So the other question: how did you watch Democracy Now? How did that like? How'd
So
you hear it? Or what?
yeah, so we in Pelican Bay, you're allowed to have a TV, right?
Okay.
And so um, in the TV, you get about, I think we get like all the basic channels, and then we used to get two cable channels, which was BET and ESPN, and then but also I don't know how they do it, right? But they have like a closed caption station. The
Yeah.
prison does. The prison has a closed caption station where they would run a bunch of like updates about what's going on in the prison, or just sometimes they would even put the food menu or the movie menu, because like every week they would show a new movie on that channel, right?
Right.
And so it also served as a radio station, and that's how I would listen to I think it was KPFA,
Yeah.
Pacifica
Yeah.
Radio.
Pacific up in North. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's KPFA, and they used to transmit Democracy Now. I think they also used to transmit Latino USA with Maria Hinojosa, um, and I think BBC News, and then a couple other like stations like they used to have this dope ass hip hop station, man. They're doing it. DJ Tomcat used to come out at 12 o'clock midnight to 3 in the morning, and like I was die hard, bro. So I would like stay up, like I'll stay up till fucking midnight, just to stay up 3 in the morning and just
Yeah.
listen, And he would always start off with like some fire ass music, like he'd go in phases. Like he'll start off like his first hour would be like all the dedications that everybody wrote in. The second hour was like all his music, and Homeboy had some good taste in music. And then like the last hour would be like mostly like the popular stuff, right? But yeah, man. So there was that. And for me, these were all just different tools of learning, bro. You mean like the hip hop, right? Like, I, prior to that, I was all about gangster rap. You know what I'm saying? Like listening to Sibo and shit that that I would listen to when I was out there fucking doing dumb shit, right? And when I got to Pelican Bay and I started listening to the dude DJ Tomcat, like he's playing some other shit, like that's conscious, right? Like and I just like there's some popular hip hop that could be conscious, right? That kind of touches on social issues, but like Dead Prez, Immortal Technique, Pharoah Monch, and like dude was playing all kinds of shit, and like that for me, you know, it started planting seeds, and not just the music, but also along with the other things that I was doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With the reading, the conversation that I was having around with people around me, all played an influence in helping me change my perspective.
So what kind of literature were you getting in at the time?
Uh, the prison library, Pelican Bay Shoe, man, has one of the best libraries that I ever seen in any fucking prison, bro. And it's fucked up though, because that I had to go to solitary confinement to get access to those books when I couldn't have access to those books in general population.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like where people really need it most, right? But it makes sense though. It makes sense. It makes sense that in general population, in particular the prisons that I was at, which were hyper violent prisons, level 4s, that there was nothing there, right? Because it continues to perpetuate that same cycle, right? Now, if you look at the way prisons are now, especially like a lot of these level 4s, a lot of folks are in there, oh, I'm just about my education, because now education, there's a lot of more education programs available. But that was kind of fucked up that I had to go to solitary confinement to get exposed to all of these different ways of learning.
Yeah.
And I didn't have access to that in general population.
So right now, so far, we've talked about kind of the informal learning you got from, Democracy Now with Amy Goodman, Juan Gonzalez, all them, and then talk about some of the books that you were available through the library. So let's talk a little more about the formal education, the accredited kind of stuff. How did you get involved in that while in
But
shooting?
but I would say though, before we even, I sent you a video, right, where they talked about some of the books I was reading, and one thing that I didn't like about that video that it didn't talk about um, those. It was all a Eurocentric literature, if you
Yeah,
notice that,
it did.
right? They didn't talk about Eduardo Galeano. They didn't talk about the Zapatista reader. They didn't talk about the literature I read on Ricardo Flores Magon, on Emiliano Zapata. You know what I mean? So that right there was also um, very profound in impacting my perspective, right?
All
Especially
right.
Ricardo Flores Magon.
All right. Well, so then before you answer that question, let's do it right now. Then, if they won't do it, me and you can do it.
Yeah.
All right. Tell us what reading Magon, reading Zapata, reading about like the heroes of the revolution. What did that mean to you while you were while you locked up like that?
Well, I grew up always, even, elementary school, up until a certain point, I was a wetback, the stick,
Mhm.
being, talked down like that, right? Whether it was in school by either students or, staff, right? And maybe the staff wasn't calling me a spick or a wetback. Um, but, and I maybe was not able to know how to read the literature, but I know how to read their body language.
Right, right, right,
You know what I mean? And just the way that they would speak to you, it wasn't it wasn't or the way they would speak to me, it wasn't nurturing,
right,
right? It was more condescending, right?
right.
And you can feel that. And so for me, as a kid, I used to, I love Mexico. Like Mexico. When I would go to Mexico as a kid, that was the place where I learned what unconditional love was, right? From my both of my grandmas, right? Like whatever the fuck I did, they always loved me. And I never really understood that, right? But that was just unconditional love. So for me, Mexico always has a special place in my heart. So when people talk down about it, like, well, nah, you don't know the Mexico that I know, right? And a lot of that, and just the Mexico that I knew was more through personal relationships, right? But once I started reading the history of it, right, and I realized, like, yo, there's a lot more to our people than just fucking, crossing a border that crossed us, right?
Yeah. One of the things I've in the series, this interview I've talked to, I got chance to talk to Nolan Cabrera. I got a chance to talk to um, um, Marie Martinez, who teaches U.S. history at LA Trade Tech. All kinds of people who've gone on to get to move through the levels of higher education. And a consistent thing they talk about is the experiences you're describing here. And I know in my own life, I've experienced this as well. So I want to ask you the same question I asked them. When was the first time you were punished in life for being a smart Mexican?
Uh, that's I don't know. I don't think if anything, not that I know I knew I was intelligent, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I just didn't know that I was, I couldn't read proper English, right? I used to say Jello
uh,
instead of yellow, right?
yeah,
And but I think if anything, right, I would have to probably say in prison, bro. Like I got put in prison for the literature that I had.
yeah,
I got put in solitary confinement for the literature that I was reading. You know what I mean? Like for reading cultural literature, right? They labeled it as gang related, and because of that, they felt that that was sufficient enough to place me in solitary confinement for the remainder of my sentence. So I think that was probably like definitely one of the harshest
yeah.
punishments for whether either being smart or wanting to better themselves or
Right, right,
myself.
yeah. Well, I mean, when I say that, I mean I'm not trying to put anybody down or anything like that, or create hierarchy. But the
Right.
reality is, anytime we excel, our intelligence is always questioned in this country, right? So you can achieve all these things on your own. I mean, on an individual level, you can do all these things, and Danny Murillo, he's a great success story. He turned his life around, etc. Like, come see him talk, right? Okay, cool. I can write some books and like, oh, come see Matt, blah 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 blah. But you and I as individuals can do that. Maria can do that. Nolan Cabrera can do that. All notable figures, right? Okay, sure, cool. But we as a community cannot escape this unless we collectively escape it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like none of us can really be free, of this stuff, so long as our community is seen, so long as they keep oppressing us and keep insulting us. There's just no way we as individuals, even as individuals, we can't like live our full life, because everywhere I go, I'm questioned. I'm sure the same thing happens to you. Everywhere you go, it's like, there's always someone who's got something to say that's like, like, well, he's only here because of this, or this only there
Yeah,
because of this,
yeah.
and all kinds of disqualifiers. So can you talk a little about that?
And even just that, right? Like, I've been fortunate, bro. Like, I've been very successful in this work, right? But I put a lot of hard work in it, yo. Like, I sacrifice relationships, with people that, in particular, like, for instance, with my dad, right? Like, I came home, and the 2 years that I was living here at home with my family, my focus was just community college. Like, I was just trying to get out of this environment. Not because I didn't feel safe, but because my little brother and my nephew, they were doing the same shit that I was doing at that age. And my concern was that if they raid the house and they find guns here, they're gonna blame them on me and not on some 15, 16-year-old. So for me, it was like, yo, I needed to do what I can to get out of here. And the only way I can get out of here is through education. I figured out that I can transfer. So I'm gonna transfer as far as possible. And when I got up to Berkeley, you know, I left I took off to Berkeley, right? But people make this assumption like, oh, well, you got all these fellowships and all this because where you were at. But like, bro, nobody comes out of solitary confinement and gets handed this stuff.
Yeah,
Nobody. You
right,
have no regard, or even you, bro. Like, nobody comes out of you didn't come out of Sedeno and just got handed everything, right? Like, you had to work for it, bro. And so like that's what some people don't realize. Like, yo, nah, man, you didn't see those long nights, me staying up at fucking 2 in the morning working on my paper that UC Berkeley, or
right.
all of the times that I sacrificed going out with the homies because like, now I gotta go work on my research paper, and it at the same time though, like, I lost out on a lot of opportunities to connect with people,
Yeah.
but it was worth it, yo.
Right. But like, in my case, or the case of like a lot of us, I mean, it's, yeah, there's the general society thing, but I mean, like in your case, it's even more ridiculous. It's just absolutely more ridiculous. It's the idea that like having been in prison is somehow an advantage. Like having been formerly incarcerated is somehow an advantage in society. Like, oh yeah, because everyone's just lining up to like, help out the formerly incarcerated. Everyone's just lining up to be like, oh, you spent like 5 years in Pelican Bay. Let me get you this like let me get the corner office ready. I mean,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's such a I mean, like that's such an absurd idea. I mean, yeah, can you talk to that? I mean, like just talk about can we talk a little about that? Can we talk a little bit about just how much like these cages and prisons, just having passed through them, just destroy people's lives. I mean, even on a low level, just even having a DUI
Yeah.
can prevent you from like getting a job at Costco. I mean, like like that, like but to be incarcerated, I mean, that's a whole other level. Can you talk about just how difficult it is?
Well, it's not just like the job situation, right? It's the housing situation, which I think that's the most important one, right? Like, not being able to, once you come home from prison, you're not going to get housing off the bat because you don't have the money for it, right? So, but if your family stays in the project or in Section 8, you can't live with them because they're, technically nobody on parole can live in that house. You know what I mean? So like, you're already being, you're being separated again from your family, right? And without access to housing, it's more than likely, the probabilities of going back to prison are going to fucking skyrocket, right? So there's the housing situation. There's access to, depending on the conviction that you have, access to social services, you know, um, and then employment, right? So these are three things, right? Like housing, social services, and employment. The three things that you're going to need to be able to survive. Not just, we're not even talking about thriving. We're just talking about just surviving, right? Don't even have those basic needs, right? And for me, I was lucky enough that my mom, she was still willing to take me back in. But
Yeah,
when I got here, I realized, no, this is not a place where I want to be, though. You know?
right. So okay, so we're there. You're out. Um, you get to community college. Um, your sights are set on just like, I need to complete this AA. So what happens between you wanting, just thinking in terms of a completion of an AA, to like, oh no, I can keep going. How does that transition take place?
So when I first got out, I thought like my third day out, one of my comadre, actually my comadre, Valerie. She came to visit me. She came to see me, and she's like, "Hey, Danny, so what do you plan on doing?" Like, oh, I'm planning on going back to school. I want to finish my AA. She's like, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna send the homegirl over here, Caroline. Another of my friend, right, childhood friend. Like, she's at Cerrito. So my friend Caroline, probably like same day, next day, took me to campus, walked me around campus, helped me apply for admissions, helped me apply for financial aid, um, introduced me to all of the different spaces on campus, the writing center, the math center, EOPS, and so she kind of got me going to how to start that process, and it was so much needed, right? Because it was kind of intimidating,
Yeah.
trying to do that on my own, especially like the logging onto the computers and all that. I was away for 14 years, bro. So
Yeah.
so that was kind of intimidating. And once I got that ball rolling, right, I missed the spring deadline to apply for the spring semester. So I ended up applying for the summer. And in the meantime, I got out in January and my first class didn't start until like July. So I had like about 6, 7 months. I decided to, try to look for work, right? And the only work that I was able to get was at a warehouse through one of my, homies right here in the neighborhood. He introduced me to his brother-in-law who was a manager at a employment agency. He hired me with, because I don't care about your record. My brother-in-law said, you're cool. Um, so when I wouldn't go to work for the warehouse, I would go to campus and do drop-in counseling. I was just always trying to talk to a counselor, just talk to a counselor, just do drop-in counseling. And one day I met a counselor, Gloria Morales, and cool people, right? Older Chicana from East LA, and I told her a little bit of my experience, and she's like, I got deals that been in prison in the '60s and this and that, so I know what it is. And she introduced me to someone that was running the Puente program. I got plugged into the Puente program, and that kind of just opened my eyes, to being able to transfer. But also in that time span where I was going back and forth to doing the drop-in counseling, one day I ran into another of my homies from the neighborhood. He was just graduating and transferring to UC Irvine, and it was my homeboy Manuel Calendario. And he didn't recognize me, but I recognized him. I'm like, I called him out. We started talking, and in a 30-minute conversation, bro. This is before I even heard about Puente. He's asking me, "What are you doing, Danny?" I go, "Look, man, I'm just trying to finish what I started in prison, man. I'm trying to finish my AA and then get a job." I'm like, "What are you doing?" I go, "Look, I just graduated. I'm getting my bachelor's. I'm doing pre-med. I'm trying to be a brain surgeon." I'm like, "Damn, that's fuck." And homie just did about like 9 years in prison, right? And
Yeah.
when he told me that, I wasn't like, some, homies are like, brain surgeons, pretty crazy, fool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And when he told me that, like, I can totally see you as a fucking brain surgeon, bro. Cause I remember homeboy, bro, like, homeboy could steal a car in less than 60 seconds, bro. Like, he can hotwire a car like that. And to me, when he told me that, I
Yeah.
started having flashbacks of him wiring cars. We're like, yo, all you're doing is wiring brains. It's just a matter of learning. It's just a matter of learning the skill,
Yeah.
right? It's just a matter of learning. But
Oh,
homie was
plumbing.
good with his hands. He was good with his hands. I've always
Yeah.
remembered that he was good with his hands. His dad was a gallero, so he grew up raising chickens and roosters. And so when he told me that you want to get to the medical field, like, yeah, that makes sense, bro. Like, you've always had this, this knack for, taking care of creatures, animals and shit, and you're always good with your hands. So it makes sense, right? And so I think he ended up doing a master's in veterinarian, and he ended up being a professor teaching. He ended up teaching, right? But he's the one that told me, hey, look, Danny, if you just want to get your AA, that's all good, bro. But these are the things that you can do to transfer. You can actually get a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, or a law degree, bro. And in that 30-minute conversation, he just kind of broke it down and told me everything that I had to do. And then that's the reason I would always go back, talk to the counselors. I would always go back to campus, talk to the counselor until I finally found someone that I can connect with, right? And that just kind of, um, once I met that counselor, she introduced me to Puente, and just boom, everything just fucking went from there.
Yeah. 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 So tell the audience a little bit about the organization Puente, because not everyone's
For sure.
familiar.
So Puente was a program that started back in the early 1980s. It was a program specifically for Chicano students that in community college, and I believe also high school, right? And it was designed to get more Chicanos into the UC system. And then once 209 got passed, and ended affirmative action, they can no longer cater just to Chicanos, so it became a program for first generation students, right? First generation students, so it kind of broadened the applicant field, right? To just all non, to just any student, right? and so but it still has the same component, right? It's a 1 year program. You do 2 English classes, one in the fall semester, one in the spring semester, along with a counseling class each semester. You're in the same class, the same English class with the same professor for that whole year, the same counseling class, the same professor for that whole year, and then they also pair you up with the mentor. And I think for me that was um, instrumental, right? That really helped me um, open up about a lot of things that I was going through. Having this mentor, which was Armando Soto, who was an academic counselor at Cerritos at that time, but now he's the dean of student services at Santana College, right? He's not formally incarcerated, but he's Chicano, grew up in Riverside, grew up in the barrio, so a lot of the same experiences, right, and seeing a lot of the same things that I grew up seeing right here, where I grew up in the one ways, right, and but having someone that has an understanding of that experience, um, and being able to just unpack a lot of things that I was going through, um, helped me survive that experience, right? And the whole time, almost every time that I would talk to him, bro, it was always just about my little brother or my nephew, yo, because I was always fucking nervous, yo, that every time I would come home from school, the first thing that I would tell my sister, where's Gilbert? Where's Michael? And I would always get home around 10 o'clock. I would go to school at 7 in the morning and get home at 10 o'clock at night. And, and that was like my first question to my sister, like, where's Michael? Where's Gilbert? And if they're on the streets, like, wherever they're at, tell me to call me and I'll go pick them up because I don't want them walking the street. I know what can happen at that time. Right? I should any time of the day where I'm from, right? Any time of the day, and especially if they're part of that lifestyle,
Yeah.
people are gonna be gunning for them, right? And so for me, my concern was like, yo, I don't want shit to happen to my little brother, man. So I was always talking to my mentor Armando about my little brother and my nephew and trying to fucking create a different, trying to give them opportunities to do something different with their lives, And because when I was in prison, my little brother and my nephew used to write me, yo, and they're like, yo, we want to follow in your footsteps, and they wanted to go, to prison. They've been to jail, they've been to prison. You mean they didn't do it a long time, but that was the path that they wanted to follow, man. And so for me, it was like I was just trying to do everything I could possibly can, to change at least their lives. I wasn't expecting to be able to do all the work that I was doing. My thing was like I just want to change their lives. As long as I can change their lives, I'm good. I've done my job.
Yeah. So you transferred to Berkeley, and first of all, I just want to say that before we get into that, it's just so bizarre to me, right? Because obviously being formerly incarcerated or working with people who are formerly incarcerated, deformerly incarcerated, are fall into that category of non-traditional students, right? That they have, but like 80% of or something like 80%, I don't know what exact number is, but it's like most people who go to college fall in the category of most people on a college campus are non-traditional students, like the wide majority.
Why?
No, it's such an. I'm just saying it's an absurd concept. Like the traditional student is supposedly like someone who comes out of high school and goes into
Yeah.
So like almost everybody on a college campus.
And maybe people are realizing that shit's a fucking scam, man. Going to community college is a lot cheaper, and then transferring. You know what I mean? And I think for me it was a very enriching experience, yo. Like community college was, I, even though I did a lot of great stuff in Berkeley, community college was the place to be for me as a student, right? Not as an organizer and none of that. 'Cause I wasn't doing the organizing work. I was just being a student, and I fucking loved it, yo.
So yeah. Before we get let's get to Berkeley, but before we do that, can you just give us I mean, tell our audience just how important community colleges were for you, and how important they are to our community in general, and how important they are to working class people, and why it's a good idea.
Exactly. Right. One, it was regardless, I had to go to community college because I came home. I enrolled into community college while I was in prison, around the age of 27. I came home at 30. So of course I was going to be a non-traditional student, right? But as I learned all of these systems, right? Because that's what they are, right? They're systems, right? As I learned the higher education system, just the same way I learned the prison system, I started not just learning about the system for my advantage, but for the advantage of other people, right? And to educate them about the opportunities that community college does offer, right? Like for me, it gave me an opportunity to build my resume, right? That's where I got my first official job, through work studies, right? So I built the resume there, because I made connections, right? I learned also, right? One thing is not just about the degree. You can get all kinds of degrees that make no connections at the university or at the college,
Yeah.
and you ain't gonna have nobody who's gonna be fully leverages for you, right? So
Right.
networking was important, right? And for me, it wasn't just about networking, but also building relationships with people that I felt were going to add value to my life, not necessarily monetary value, but
Yeah.
just a humanistic value, you
Right.
know. But and again, that's where our community's at, bro. Like that's where our community's at. But one thing that I realized was that even though the community colleges is where the community is at, the college is not in the community. You know what I mean? Yeah, the college is there, the institution is there, but it's not in the community. You know what I mean? And so for me, like that's something that I would like to change, right? Like community college can play an important role in our communities, right? In particular for formerly incarcerated students. It's a place that um, for us, much more so than going to our parole office, it's a neutral place. It's a place where there's there's resources there. There's people there that are there to support you, and there's opportunities there. And I think being able to take full advantage of the opportunities can put you in positions to succeed.
Yeah. Um, I promise I want to get to Berkeley, but the next
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
is that when you say community college, but I really think is you mentioned the library in Pelican Bay. So when you get out, can you speak a little bit to the importance of libraries and why we need to why one we need to stop defunding them, and two why we independent of what the government does, we need to start using them. I mean, these things are there.
no, definitely. I think I spent a lot of time, a lot of my time in as a community college student in the Norwalk Library, the Cerritos Library, and the Cerritos College Library. I
Yeah,
was there then you're Monday through Sunday, doing my
yeah,
work, doing my readings, and it's sad because when I would go to the Norwalk Library that's right here in my community, it was always empty, bro.
mhm,
But then I would go to the Cerritos College, to the library in Cerritos, in the city of Cerritos. They have a fucking 3-story library, bro. Like, it is fucking beautiful, right? It's a private library, but it was always packed, and so um, that kind of for me was kind of it hurt, that I didn't see my community in the library, even though I liked it because there was nobody there because it was quiet. It still
right.
was sad that the community wasn't there taking advantage of the resources that it offered, right? And,
Yeah, yeah,
and but I also understand, bro, that a lot of times, a lot of these familias, man, they're just too busy trying to survive that they don't got time to do these types of things with their children.
yeah, yeah.
And so I think, and especially if the library is not offering any programs to support the kids, a lot of times, parents don't have the time to do it themselves.
Right. Well, I think there's a whole situation one, really busy. Two, we're really discouraged. We're really discouraged from developing our minds and doing things like that. And then three, like you mentioned earlier, there was an interview talking about you reading these books, right? And you read all these different books, and the only books they wanted to focus on were these kind of traditional European texts, right? Which there's a lot there's a lot to be gained from there's a lot to be gained from the genius of all the world, the
Yeah,
whole world over, right?
don't get me wrong. I love those books, but they weren't as impactful as Eduardo Galeano.
Right, right. But I mean, but it's very clear that they picked. It's very clear that they curated the selection of books you read to make a point, right?
The power of editing, right?
The power of editing. So obviously, there's an agenda there. So much at times when we try to I mean, because there's a universal truth that steel sharpens steel, and you got to work hard, and you got to like practice your jump shot. Oh, I mean, that's just true. That's nothing to do with this other stuff, right? But every time we try to like strengthen our minds, it's always like, um, discipline our minds, practice our minds, put our minds to work. It ends up being like this civilizing mission thing. You know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
like we exercise our mind by like reading like white stuff, right? And then like
Right.
we get, oh, like I'm smarter because I'm getting whiter, like like, and so like that's discouraging too. So like we need things that are like, and I hate using buzz terms, but culturally relevant, right?
Right. But I would say though that the literature that the Eurocentric literature that I was reading, it did come with a lot of social commentary,
Yeah,
in particular around issues of um, class, or like like um, um, Oliver Twist, right? Uh, Candide, Candide talks about fucking military conquest and religion, and like in a very mocking way, right? Which
yeah, it's hilarious.
that's what I love about it. Like I
Yeah,
love sarcasm,
yeah, yeah.
and so it did have value to it. Also, I used to read the North American Council of Latin America, which
Okay.
is a newsletter. Again, another book that was also very inspiring me into wanting to be a scholar. Even though I didn't know exactly what it was, I would read these articles like, who's this guy with, this guy has a PhD, he's at Berkeley, this guy has a PhD, he's was it at CUNY or Greg Landinos to come out in it, So I used to, all these different folks that were talking about things that I found very relevant
Yeah,
was also very inspirational.
yeah. So yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I mean, I read Candide. I mean, that shit was that shit was that shit was hilarious. I mean, that was kind of that was one of those pivotal books
Mhm.
in my life too. But again, like obviously, like Candide amongst all kinds of other things,
Yeah.
right? But it's like Candide, like that Candide showed Danny Murillo the way. Voltaire
Right,
like
right,
opened,
right.
like, and then like this poor little Mexican boy learned to be smart by reading Voltaire. You know what I mean? Like that, like it just ruins everything. You can't even just
Mhm.
enjoy. You can't even just enjoy a book. It just ruins everything. All right. So finally, you get to Berkeley. You meet up with like-minded individuals. You form this organization. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I get to Berkeley fall 2010, I mean 2012. I'm already going there with the intention of doing research around school to prison pipeline, right? Prior to going to Berkeley, I went to um, an event around school to prison pipeline. I didn't know what it was. I just, it sounded cool, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna go check this out. And there was a guy there named um, Johnny Ramirez. I don't know if you know Johnny.
A little bit.
Yeah, and he was at this time he was a PhD student at UCLA, right? And he's doing a presentation on school to prison pipeline,
Yeah.
and like, yo, dude's talking about my fucking life, you know, like this is literally my life story, and at this time, around this time, I had just gotten awarded a scholarship from UC Berkeley to do my own research. Like I'm doing research on this. I don't know what this is, but this is what I'm going to research. So when I get to Berkeley, I'm asking for people, like, hey, who's doing work on school to prison pipeline? Who's doing work on school to prison pipeline? I go to my department, I meet my advisor, Laura Jimenez, and I say, who's doing work on school to prison pipeline? I'm an ethnic studies major. I got a scholarship, and she introduces me to Patricia Pat Hilden and Victoria Robinson, lecturers and faculty in the ethnic studies department. And it was meeting them, you know, um, I tell them, I'm formerly incarcerated, and it was Pat Hilden who brought up the idea of like, yo, let's have a conversation with this space is called the Transfer Reentry Student Parent Center, and it's a space for non-traditional students, transfer reentry student parent, military, now formerly incarcerated, and we were gonna go and talk to the person that was running that program and just ask her if they can provide just a table for formerly incarcerated students to come and chill, like just a table specifically for them. And that was just, that's the conversation started very basic. We just wanted a table, right? And at this time, though, I was the only one that was identifying as formerly incarcerated.
Yeah.
And then I meet homeboy on the first day of school. I meet Steven Sifra, you know, at first, you know, he was kind of hesitant about like trying to get involved in anything. Like he told me
Yeah.
that, you know, his goal was just to lay under the radar until he got his PhD and be like, yo, I'm formally incarcerated, but I got a PhD, motherfuckers. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, but and then I invited him to do a panel on solitary confinement um, through my friend Azadeh Zarabi, who invited, you know, she invited me to do a panel on solitary confinement and regarding the hunger strike. And that's kind of like how my friend Steven got involved too. You know, like, yo, you know, I'm in. You know, like let's get to work. So
Yeah.
so as we're having these conversations around solitary confinement, we're also having conversations about starting underground. You know, starting a program for formerly incarcerated students. We don't know exactly what. We just know we want to start something, right? And in the spring of 2013, um, we both the professors Pat Hilden and Victoria Robinson organized a reading group, right? It was the Critical Prison Studies Reading Group. And I started recruiting a bunch of folks like, yo, we're having this reading group for next semester. It's going to be, you know, a pass, no pass, or you can take it for credit, you know? And I just recruited a bunch of different folks that were either formerly incarcerated or have family that were incarcerated. And our first meeting was probably about like 15 people. And we all kind of go around introducing ourselves. And about like 7 or 8 of those people there, they're like, I'm here because of Danny. I'm here because of Danny. I'm here because of Danny. You know,
Yeah.
and as we started doing the reading group, bro, like, you know, we're just, you know, every week somebody was bringing in a different, some different literature and discussing it, right?
Yeah.
And as we're doing that, you know, we're also having conversation like, yo, well, what are we doing here? Like, what else can we do here besides just sit here and read? You mean like what kind of movement work can we do? And we start having conversation like, yo, let's start. What can we do for what kind of space can we develop beyond just a table? You know what I mean? Like starting a space for formerly incarcerated students. And I remember we invited our very first meeting. We invited the folks from Project Rebound, and at this time it was Jason Bell, who's still part of Project Rebound, and Ayerto Morales. Um, he was the data specialist, I believe, at Project Rebound. Both formerly incarcerated bros, you know, cool fucking dudes, you know.
Yeah.
We invite them to our space to our first meeting, and they're like, if y'all trying to start a program here, and they kind of break it down, tell us what we need. Y'all need you need a room. It doesn't matter what it is. That could be a broom closet. Just make sure you get an office space, you get a phone and a mailbox. And so we're, you know, having a discussion like, well, how are we going to do that? We don't got no funding. And two of the people that were part of the organizing work, which was the homegirl Wendy Pacheco and Valerie Jameson. Valerie Jameson was the executive vice president of student affairs, right? Executive vice president of internal affairs,
Mm.
right? So anything I do with campus affairs, like she was knew about it. And Wendy Pacheco was she was the Raza representative in the student senate, right? And so they were also co-founders of Underground Scholars, right? And so as we're doing the organizing for Underground Scholars, they both they discover that there's a grant for up to $135,000 for a student club. You know, any student club can apply.
Yeah.
And we're like, what? Well, then fuck it, let's start a student club. Like we just got to work. We worked on our constitution. We signed it. We submitted it. As soon as we got approved, we applied for the funding, and
Yeah.
we ended up getting it, right. And it was with that funding we were able to you know, rent out some space on campus, or actually off campus at a nonprofit called Styles Hall that does a lot of work. You know, it's a nonprofit that does work with UC Berkeley in terms of it has programs for Latinx students, Native American, and Black students to recruit into UC Berkeley, whether it's high school or community college. So we said, you know what, let's rent some space at Styles Hall. So we rented an office, you know, got some desks, some sofas, some printers, computers, just anything to support students, right?
Yeah.
And it was just that initial funding that we got in 2014. That's when we got that funding, 2014, and just kind of started building up from there. You know, we started building up from there. You know, about 2 years later, we ended up getting like $500,000 from the state legislator, and just kind of, you know, it kind of just building up. You know, at this time I was in New York, but some folks, we're still doing the work on campus at Berkeley, pushing. And now, um, where we're at right now, UC Berkeley has a program for formerly incarcerated students. Uh, UCLA Burley started off their program. It's called Bruin Underground Scholars at UCLA, and they also have a student club. So does Berkeley, and all the other UCs have an underground scholars student club, but not a program, except for UC Davis has a Beyond the Stats, and UC Merced. We haven't found anybody at UC Merced that has identified as formerly incarcerated, but
Yeah.
we know that they're there.
Come on.
We know that they're there. Just folks haven't identified. But everywhere else,
Yeah.
besides Davis and Merced, has an underground scholar student club, and the goal is for every UC to have a student program.
Yeah. So can you tell us about corrections to college?
Yeah. Corrections to college is where I was working at prior to where I work at now. Right now, I'm at the campaign for college opportunity.
Yeah, I'm just trying to go in like order.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And corrections to college, I ended up going to corrections to college. I was fortunate enough to end up going to corrections to college after I completed a fellowship in New York. I was working at the Vera Institute of Justice and also in New Jersey at Rutgers University. And while I was out on the East Coast, I was awarded the Soros Justice Advocacy Fellowship. And then my work was to create a statewide network of formerly incarcerated students in California, formerly incarcerated students and alumni or graduates. And so Corrections to College ended up being my host organization when I came back to the East Coast to California. And they were supporting my work as a Soros Fellow for about 18 months. And then after that, they ended up hiring me full time. And I was fortunate enough to be there for about 3 years. Yeah. So anyway, Corrections to College. It was a 5-year initiative. When it first started, it was renewing communities, and it started around 2016. And the goal of renewing communities was to it always started as it was always a 5-year initiative, right? It was a time-ending project, but the goal of the project was to get the colleges and universities and these higher education systems to take over the work in supporting currently and formerly incarcerated students, right? So when the renewing communities first started, I think they had like a grant of $5 million that they gave out to different colleges and universities to start some work, either to start or to expand the work that they were already doing, right? Whether it's supporting incarcerated students or formerly incarcerated students.
Yeah.
And along the way, as we're funding these different projects, we were also doing work on a statewide level, with the community college chancellor's office, with Project Rebound, continuing to push for these programs to be supported through the state legislator, right? Because we know that things ain't gonna last if you just keep on depending on on philanthropy, right? Because with philanthropy, like there's always gonna be a new thing that's gonna get funded, right? Right now it's COVID-19, right? Like shit changes, right?
Right.
And so like sooner or later, formerly incarcerated people are not gonna be the sexy thing, So the funding could run out, right? So the main thing is like, how do we continue to push the legislator to fund these programs, without having to depend on philanthropy or nonprofits to do this work?
Yeah.
And so far it's going good, it's so far, fuck, man, I think like there's about close to maybe like 60 to 70 community colleges doing some type of support service for incarcerated or formerly incarcerated students. There's about maybe like 10 to 13 Cal States that are doing some type of support for formerly incarcerated students, and one Cal State that's doing a bachelor's program at Lancaster State Prison, which is Cal State LA. And then the work that we do through Underground Scholars, which it's mostly supporting folks to transition, whether from incarceration back into the community or transition from community college into the UC. I mean, so there's work being done all over the state, but it's just all kind of done in our own little silos, and it would be a beautiful thing to be able to bring everything together and advocate as a whole instead of advocating on our individual regions. You know,
Right, right, right. So what do you think? What do you think the key is to making that happen?
figuring out a way how everybody's needs get met. You know, but it's difficult, right? You can't please everybody. You know, and everybody's not going to get what they want, but that's the tricky part, you know. Unfortunately, you know, is everybody we all have our own agendas, you know. And for me, you
Yeah,
know, my agenda is seeing a collective unity, you know, throughout not just, you know, like there needs to be more collaboration between the prison programs and the campus programs to help with transition as folks are coming home. There needs to be more collaboration between the campus programs and community colleges with Cal State and the UC program so that we can continue to help students to transition, you
yeah,
know, and most importantly is like continue to educate students, formerly incarcerated students and incarcerated students about their options. Because a lot of times folks just think that they're limited in what they can do, you know. And it's not to say that if folks just want to do a drug counseling certificate, cool, man. Like that, if that's what you want to do, that's cool. But if that's the only thing that you think you can do, nah, bro, there's a lot more you can do. You can actually not get your yeah, get your certificate in counseling, but then after that, get your bachelor's in social welfare, and you're gonna see the way you expand your levels of opportunities.
yeah.
You
Right, right.
know, and so that's the thing for me. Like, continue to educate people about their opportunities and the options that they have,
Yeah,
but never telling somebody what to do. That's not what I want to do.
right, right. So I'm looking at like these. I've been looking at these charts lately, and like in 1978 to 80 or something around that time period, there's about 500,000 people in prison. By the mid 80s, there's about 1.5. And then by the time like I reach adulthood, you reach adulthood, there's about 2 million, right? And then it went up, and it's kind of stabilized around that 2.2 to 2.5 range, right? Um, Increasingly, that's a lot of people. I mean, that's like that's a lot of people. See, because 2 million not like total, that's 2 million at one time. I mean, there's people coming in and out, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so like more and more and more, there are more and more people that have been incarcerated because the incarceration system has just exploded.
yeah.
Um, so what I'm interested in is like this kind of like, because you talk about getting education, talk about doing all these things, talk about this, and I got all these fancy degrees, but it's still hard to get a job. Like that little checkbox, it's still hard. It's still in the way, right? Um, but are things changing because there's just so many people that have been incarcerated, or do we really, or are there other changes that need to be made in like a different
No,
section of
definitely,
society?
definitely. There's there are opportunities for people that when they come home from prison,
Yeah,
right? There are opportunities, but one, you have to work for those, right? Like, I don't think anything gets handed to you, you know. But I would love to have a system, right, where it's not about what you work for, right? Or like, you know, you have to produce something to get something, right? Like we need to support people because we need to support people, right? But at the same time, you know, like um, there are opportunities out there, right? But for me, I never the only one time there was an issue with the box, and that was when I was trying to get a job at after school program at a junior high, right? I did the interview. I knew I wasn't going to get the job. You mean? But I just wanted to do the interview just to see if the classes that I took in prison helped me, which was how to do a job interview, you know?
yeah, 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 yeah.
And so I did the job interview, and she was like, "Yo, I love you. I want to hire you. I just have one more question. Do you have any felonies?" I go, "Yeah, I got two of them." Like, "Oh, it's okay. It's okay. That doesn't mean that you're disqualified. Were there any guns involved?" Like, "Yeah, three of them." Like, "Oh shit." Damn. Okay, well here, let me call my boss. And she called her boss. Like, "Yeah, it's not gonna happen." So like, but I knew I wasn't gonna get it. But even though I wasn't gonna get it, I felt good because I did a good job in the interview. Which that was
Right,
that
right,
was my goal. My goal was to see if I could do a job interview. But
right,
since then though, I haven't had a problem with seeking employment, right? And I think it's because of the work that I'm doing. right? Like the work that I'm doing, my experience lends me that credibility. And then also on top of the fact that I have a degree, two AA and a bachelor's degree, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
You've also been interviewed by the Nation and like,
yeah, that's
but you got a pretty impressive resume. But I'm gonna go on. I'm sorry, go on.
but for other people though, I still talk to other people that are having issues, yo.
Yeah,
And even though there is a movement to ban the box, I think it's important to understand that that movement to ban the box was for service sector jobs, right? It was for jobs to work at Target, at Home Depot, at McDonald's. They weren't jobs to be a lawyer. They weren't jobs to be professors. You mean like so for us, we're still faced. There's another box that continues to come in play for people that are seeking professional careers, and that's the career licensing, right? That continues to be a barrier for people, right? Whether it's clinical psychology, even folks trying to be a teacher. You mean like passing the what is it, the CBAS or the teacher credential. These are things that are still impacting people who have conviction histories, even though they got degrees from UCLA, USC. Some people got degrees from Harvard, with formerly incarcerated, and still can't get jobs. So, although yes, there's been movement to ban the box, certain boxes still exist that still impact people, in particular people that have went to higher education. And so I think some of the work that needs to be done is around um, removing those barriers for people that have conviction here. And I understand that for some, those boxes are always going to exist, right? Like if you have a conviction history against doing something to children, like I get it, you're never going to fucking work as a fucking school teacher or at elementary school. Or if you're convicted of a bank robbery, they probably not might not want to have you as a at a bank, right? And so
right.
and hopefully we get to the point where we can move away from that too. But I get it, right? There are certain things that might still come into effect, but there are certain things that can certainly be removed. And considering people like how long they've been out, everything that they've done since they've been out, these are all things that should come into play, and not just continue to view somebody based on what they did 10, 20, 15 years ago.
Right, right. So, we've been talking now for over an hour, and it's been very illuminating. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed it, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So, can you tell us how we can connect to you and your work and what you're doing now and where you're marching forward?
Yeah. So right now, I started work at the campaign for college opportunity. I'm the program analyst, and I started working there in January after completing my work up in Berkeley at Corrections to College. And I'm doing some work around their currently and formerly incarcerated student work. Um, I'm also in the process of applying to return to school. Um, at one point, I was thinking about pursuing a PhD, but now I just settled with, and not to say that that's less than, but I'm going to do a master's at either Cal State Long Beach or Cal State LA. And ultimately, what I would, for me, I want to work at a community college. I see myself working at a community college, either full time at a community college, but at the same time, I still want to be involved in the work on a larger scale, right? So I sit on the board for I sit on the advisory board for the Alliance for Higher Education in Prison. It's we do we support colleges and universities doing work inside prisons. Also, campuses that are supporting formerly incarcerated students through technical assistance. We're doing some research. Although I'm not doing none of that work, I'm sitting on their advisory board. Sitting on that advisory board does give me access to a nationwide network of folks doing this work, though. And so
Yeah,
for me, that's kind of one way to stay in touch with that work on a nationwide, right? In terms of getting a hold of me, I, folks can email me, or Facebook. I'm on Instagram, also LinkedIn. My email is danny@collegecampaign.org. Um, Facebook, just Danny Murillo. But yeah, I'm always, available to come, especially if it's formerly incarcerated students that wanted me, either want me to come to their campus. I'm always down to support folks, and come in and share what I know, or learn what I don't know.
yeah, absolutely. We had a question early on that's asked, what motivated you to enroll in college while you were in prison? I think we kind of answered a little bit, but if you want to expand on that.
Um, it was um, a few motivating factors. One, definitely my mom. Right when I was in prison, she told me she set the bar real low for me, bro. She goes, "Mijo, as long as you come home with your GED, I'll be happy." So like, man, that's it, mom, just a GED. Like, I'm coming home with a college degree, or at least some college credits, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But also the homies around me. Um, Definitely the homies around me. I remember having a conversation with someone, and he asked me, "Danny, what are you doing when you go home?" And I told him, I know I'm not, I don't want to come back. And he said, "Well, what's your plan?" He goes, "I don't know. I'll figure it out when I get out." And he's like, "Fool, if you don't fucking figure out your plan now, you're gonna come back." And I think that was like one of the few times that someone genuinely gave me some type of advice. And even though he said it in a very demeaning way, like I know that it came from the heart,
Right.
and literally that day, bro, that day I went back into my cell and I just sent in the application to start the GED program. And then after I got my GED, I just said, you know what, I'm gonna continue doing the school stuff, and I fell in love with it, bro.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay, so, um, like, is there any like what advice do you have for people who are coming out of incarceration? They want to go back, get their degree, um, but they don't know what step one is. What would you tell them?
Well, one is visit your local community college. Visit your local community college, and also find out if that community college has a support service program for formerly incarcerated students. And it'll be those folks right there that'll walk you through the whole process of how to enroll, how to pick your classes. But usually, even if even if there's not a program there specific for formerly incarcerated students, I would always also say like check in with EOPS. I think EOPS for me was also a place where I found community, right? I found counselors, I found students who looked like me, and so for me, always being in a place where I felt comfortable and around people that I can connect with was very important in my transition, So I think those things right there are some of the things that can definitely help you navigate and move forward.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I really thank you for your time. I really appreciate this, and hopefully we'll be talking soon.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man,
Thank
this
you,
is
man.
good. All right.
Take care, bro.
Take care.
Bye.